Hi, and welcome to Classical Stuff You Should Know. This is a podcast about classical things, literature, books, philosophy, everything you should have learned in school but probably didn't. I'm AJ Hennenberg, and I am joined by my buddies Thomas Magby.
Hello.
And Graham Donaldson.
Hello.
And two out of the three of us work at a school down here in Austin, Texas. We all three used to work there, but Thomas has moved on to do mathy things for mathy folks.
I was hanging out with a friend over the break, and they commented, "You point this out every time we start the episode that like I'm the one who left Veritas." It makes me laugh.
Well, we used to say we all work at the place, and
I know.
Should I pull that out of the intro
No,
and just say
there's one of us who's no longer with us. Anyway, here I am. I'm here.
I'm trying to do it as a like you're moving on to new and better things.
Veritas is a great place. I wouldn't say that, but yes. Did you want to say more? As I've undercut your entire introduction.
Nope, I think that's good. So take it away, Thomas.
So,
we're back from Christmas. I was going to say
we are
that.
back from Christmas.
Happy holidays.
Happy New Year.
Yep.
2022. Let's get her.
Get pitter patter.
Let's get at her.
Did you just make that up? Is that a thing?
Pitter patter, let's get at her.
That's
like
Canadian thing.
That's
Is it a Canadian thing?
yeah.
Like a super common
Yeah,
saying?
110 there, boys.
Okay, you're just saying syllables.
I've been watching some Letterkenny. I'm getting up on the
there you
lingo.
go.
I don't
That's the Texas size 10-4 there, bud.
I don't understand. You understand?
Will Snipe Sally boys.
Yeah. Wheel Snipe Sally Thomas.
Okay. What's the TV show you've been watching?
Letterkenny.
What is that?
It's a show about a small rural Canadian town.
There's
and
a
their
small
problems.
town in Ontario called Letterkenny, and the show is about a fictionalized version of that small rural farm town.
It's not clean at all.
Oh,
Okay.
gosh. No.
Is that a show happening right now, or is this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Is it still happening?
Just released season 10, I think.
Jeez,
Wow,
Louise,
it's a long
season
time.
10.
It's a long
It
running.
started as a
season
YouTube joke.
6?
Like it was started as like a sketch comedy bit on YouTube, and people were like, I want this. And so now it became a 10-season show. Jeez Louise.
I think it's 10 seasons. Maybe it was only like 4, and I'm just exaggerating.
Yeah.
I'll look it up.
All right.
Asking the hard-hitting questions. Okay, so I'm here with. I feel like I shouldn't say it because I want people to listen to this episode, but I'm coming with somewhat of a mathy topic, or it sounds like a mathy topic, and will end up being more of a English and philosophical and I guess historical discussion. But I'm here to talk about causation. That's the topic going into for today, which hearing me say causation probably makes you think this is not a particularly classical concept. And when I say the word causation, is there anything that like springs to mind immediately?
Wasn't what causes things like one of Plato's fundamental questions? Or isn't causation a fundamental question of antiquity, something like that?
Graham and AJ will have periodic flashbacks during the first 15 minutes of this conversation because we started.
Oh, is that what's happening?
Yes. So we recorded the first 15. Well, we didn't record it. We talked for 15 minutes thinking we were recording and we were not. So what Graham is remembering is the next thing that I'm going to say.
This is what I do. I just hear things and then I like kind of file them away and then they pop up and I'm like, I'm pretty sure like this is a thing.
But when you
Like
present
a
them as your own
child
ideas,
wandering through a forest, picking leaves from trees.
I present everything as my own idea.
so incredible. Wow, Graham, how did you know the next thing I was going to talk about other than it being the second time you've heard it?
We're in tune. We're just on the same wavelength, Thomas.
Well,
I've read the same things you have, apparently.
No, you've heard the same things I've read. Yeah. Nailed it. This is going to be
I feel
great.
like I listened to a podcast on
Yeah,
this.
you kind of did actually. It's great. It was a really short one though. It was only about 15 minutes,
Yeah.
and it never got to the punchline.
Didn't have a lot of depth.
That's exactly right.
Great banter,
Lack of
though.
scholarship.
Lack of scholarship.
But it works for me.
Thank you. We're going to be punchy this episode. This is our first one back after like a month and a half. So wish us luck, listener.
And listener, what we're referring to is one of our favorite reviews that we got recently that said, what was it? The lack of depth and scholarship may not appeal to everyone, but it works for me.
It's a great review. I love that. I think it's a great review. Thank you all for listening to this. We deserve 0 listeners, so thank you all for any of you listening.
Yeah, so you're welcome, that guy.
Yeah.
We're glad you're with us.
That works for you.
Yeah.
But if you all could go and leave 5-star reviews, that would be kind of a nice New Year's gift for us.
I guess.
So-
What are we going to do with them?
And not leave decent reviews that are like weirdly backhanded.
I saw this on Twitter some time ago of like the reviews that cut are the 3 or 4 stars, because the 1 star it's like, okay, you just don't like us, that's fine. The 3 or 4 star, like they get you and they don't like you. Do you know what I mean? Like it's not the like I've just rejected you off the bat. It's like I spent some time with your podcast and I still don't
And
like
I
it.
sort of enjoy it,
Yeah. But it could be better.
Yeah,
and
here are your exact
you
problems.
are insufficient. Yeah, those are the ones.
Leave a
that
link to your podcast. We'll check it out. And,
We'll leave a biting 3 or 4 star review for your podcast too.
Oh man, I wish we could reply and leave counter reviews of just the people leaving the reviews. Wouldn't that be amazing?
No, it'd be terrible.
I feel like it'd be a good choice.
all you'd be doing is like sniping people all day, right?
We're gonna get
Like,
swatted. That's what's gonna happen.
Oh yeah.
I don't like this plan at all. Okay, so speaking of 4-star reviews, Virgil is the one who said the thing that Graham is trying to remember. One of his
Plato. Amateur hour up in here.
seriously lack of scholarship. So this is going to be bad. Okay, so but Virgil's quote, which I will not read in Latin because I don't speak Latin because I lack scholarship, is happy is the man who has been able to know the causes of things. I think this is an episode that only the three of us will laugh at, and everyone listening is going to be like, what is going on?
Get to the point.
Yeah, exactly. Happy the man who has been able to know the causes of things. So that's, again, is this a classical concept? There's at least some discussion about causation, and in the history of philosophy, we will hit a point where causation is like the big question. How do we know what causes things? And we'll talk about that later, I promise.
Yeah, this is a big question.
Except we maybe won't actually get to it. But there's a specific phrase I'm hoping to get from you all when you hear the word causation. Is there like there's like the phrase that comes to mind when people talk about causation?
First cause?
Oh, see, you actually like have first cause is a great one, and that's like Aristotle talking about why does anything exist? There has to be a first cause. Maybe if I say the word correlation in causation, is there a phrase?
That's the correlation is not causation.
Right.
Is the fallacy that gets thrown around. Post hoc ergo propter hoc is the logical fallacy that just because two things are correlated doesn't mean that they caused each other.
Yes.
Well, that one is specifically about temporal causation. Just because one thing happened before another doesn't mean that it caused. Like, a black cat walked in front of my path, and then my girlfriend broke up with me. Must have been the cat.
Yeah.
Like, that's.
But I'm wondering if you can say more about it, because when you talk about that as a logical fallacy, it's a thing you talk about in the context of logic. Like what
You need to be able to prove. You need to be able to have more proof that the black cat texted your girlfriend and told her about all the other stuff you've been doing. That's why she dumped you.
But then what?
Sorry, go ahead.
Like what is allowable proof then, if not a temporal relationship should matter? If every time before I trip I see a black cat, I would at least ask a question of, is there some relationship here? But you're saying logically I shouldn't do
What
that.
if you had like a pool of data? Like you had a bell curve of black cat interactions and then breakups.
But imagine it's not even it's not a bell curve. It's like literally
One to
like,
one.
it's 100%. It's 100% of the time I see the black cat I get broken up with. If that's
gosh.
the metaphor, right? Like
What a life.
Yeah, that'd be the
What
worst.
a life to live.
You're walking to go on a date and like you see a black cat and you're like, not again.
Yeah, sorry, it's just not going to work out.
Like, come on. But like logically, you'd say that isn't a relationship, or that's not something I can point to as evidence. Correct? I guess I'm asking AJ.
You cannot draw the conclusion only based on their temporal nearness. That's the point.
But temporal nearness can be allowed.
Can be an indicator of causation. The thing about causation is that it's really hard to prove, right?
Yes.
I've seen a lot of people claim one of the main causes of World War II is this, right? Right before this happened, I don't know, they invented computers and then World War II or something.
It can't be that hard to prove. Every time I go on the internet, it says the Dow Jones is down 0.5% because of inflation fears. Right. They know why the market is down.
And this is an exact example of that kind of thing, right? And so if you're going to prove causation, I think, in my experience, your best bet is high probability of causation, right? I can show that, okay, in the past, market fears around inflation have driven the Dow down, right? Every time there's inflation fears, Dow goes down. Is it possible the Dow is down because of moon phases? And people act weird at certain moon phases? Then yeah, maybe, right?
Because they've got some intern that has to write an article every day.
Yes. I'm trying to find, there's like a famous cartoon, I think it's a New Yorker cartoon, on Wall Street today, news of lower interest rates sent the stock market up, but then the expectation of those rates would be inflationary sent the market down until the realization that lower rates might stimulate the sluggish economy pushed the market up before it ultimately went down on fears that an overheated economy would lead to a reimposition of higher interest rates. So it's just a loop on a loop on a loop.
Causation.
Which, yes, exactly. So I think that is 90% of financial commentary is that. Yeah. Mm-hmm. We'll come back to the correlation and causation. Correlation does not equal causation comment, but I think that's helpful. I think at least to start with I'm a year into this program on data science. A decent chunk of it is like, how do we know anything? Because if you start from a place of every time you see a correlation, you have to have the immediate comment of correlation doesn't imply causation, you kind of can't learn anything.
Yeah.
I think implies is a fine word.
Yes.
Correlation does imply causation. It does not prove causation.
And I think that's a helpful and necessary thing. We'll go through an example of a guy who who took this hard line of correlation not being related to causation and to his detriment. So, just as some background, the Greek word for cause comes from science and law. So again, in the case of science and law, you're looking for this kind of one-to-one relationship of, in science, why does this one outcome occur? Why do these two chemicals, when combined, lead to this other thing? And again, that's one where a correlation you can pretty clearly say is a causation. You put these two chemicals next to each other, there's a reaction, it causes some kind of outcome to come from that. If you get carbon and oxygen, you get carbon dioxide, right? Or in law, what you're looking for is not merely what events happened, but why did those events happen? It's not enough to say that your neighbor's sheep was stolen, but why was that sheep stolen? And so in that context of law, you get into these different meanings of the word cause, and this might be something you all have heard of before. That cause can be split into 4 different types of cause. Sorry, I have it.
Is this like formal cause, efficient cause? Is that the what we're talking about?
Yeah, it is actually. You did an episode on this, Graham. I don't know if you remember it. It was a long time ago. Do you remember this episode?
Yeah, we do a lot of it.
Good, nailed it. So we can talk about that in a second. But in thinking about cause and the legal setting, you start to see there's some ambiguity into what we mean by cause. So again, in the sense of, what caused my neighbor's sheep to be stolen? Well, someone picked it up and moved it.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, the day before, my neighbor had insulted my child, right? Like that could be a cause that then led to someone stealing the sheep, and then you go from there. So you get this kind of
small towns, man. I mean,
yes. Apparently, your Canadian show will tell you all about these small town rivalries, right? Still cheap? What'd you say?
Stolen sheep.
Stolen sheep. That sounds like every day. So yes, we start to see this kind of ambiguity in what we mean by the word cause. I'll come back. Part of this topic is there's a math angle to it. When I hear causation, I think of like statistics, but like 3,000 years ago, that didn't really exist. And then the other side of it is that in talking about Herodotus is trying to track the cause of the Greco-Persian wars that he's living during. And so to get to his answer of like, why are the Greeks fighting the Persians? He goes back to, here's all of Greek history and here's all of Persian history. And then this is why conflict has happened that has led us to this moment. And I think part of a question to ask in that is whether he's actually able to answer the question he sets out to prove. Like, what does it mean for the series of events we've talked about so far to cause the Greco-Persian Wars? I guess maybe I can pose it that way. Like, AJ, you just referenced World War I. Like, this is the cause of World War I. What do people mean by that when they say this caused World War I?
The Black Hand shot the Archduke.
Yeah. So in some but say more. So because that happened, that sets off.
Well, you got to put something in the textbook. Yeah, right.
But say more about. It's like to point to one event and say this caused World War I. What does that mean to say that event caused World War I?
I mean, it's either an oversimplification to tell a story.
Yes.
And this is kind of what we were even getting at when we were doing our Herodotus episodes. We're talking about like what is history, because what caused World War I would be every single event that has been happening in the years in all the different countries and all of the different people leading up to it. Some more heavily weighted than others, like leaders more heavily weighted than peasants, but still the lives of peasants in rural Germany also had an effect on, so to say that, you can't really gather enough data to be able to say it. But then in the ancient world, you had people be like, well, my cousin heard that this guy had a dream, and that's what caused the Persian War. So done. History over.
And this reminds me of, you guys ever read Sirens of Titan by Kurt Vonnegut?
No.
It's about a guy who becomes a pariah and the enemy of the world, so they basically banish him, and he goes up to, I think, the moon of Titan, and he meets this alien who apparently crash landed there. He's got a busted spaceship, and he lives to be, forever old again. And apparently all of human history has been orchestrated by this alien in order that we would set up buildings in a certain way that would spell out, help, I'm stranded, for this alien that had been living on this moon. And he's been like manipulating all of human history until this time. And so that would be the cause, right? But it's just to show that like whatever we think is the cause is probably one of a myriad, and there's interconnectedness in all of it.
Actually, I like that example because if you were to ask the people building, I haven't read the story, so tell me if this is totally wrong. But if you ask the people why they're building those buildings, they'd say, I want a house, or
exactly.
I want to build a store. But if you were to read the story, like to know the meta thing going on, you'd say it's these aliens that have like planted this desire in them, right?
Yep.
So Herodotus doesn't do this, but Thucydides, who's the next guy who writes like a big history, Thucydides differentiates between these two different types of causes. And in his history, he's thinking through both what the immediate cause of some event is and what the real cause of some event is. And his distinction is that the immediate cause is, if we're thinking World War I, it's, if we think World War I, it would be the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand triggered all of these treaties.
Yeah.
Right? So the immediate cause, the thing that immediately preceded all these countries kind of pulling into their separate camps was the assassination. But you could just as easily say that what caused it are the treaties being signed in the first place, right? Well, that's not as neat of an answer because actually it stretches over 200 years or whatever of countries signing treaties with one another and allying themselves in certain ways that were there to be a conflict, they'd be separated.
What were the cause of those treaties? Like you sort of have to follow this chain backwards, right?
And the desire to go to war as opposed to not, right? Like there must have been enough conflict that's outside of just that moment of assassination that countries wanted to fight or felt compelled to fight. Those become more cultural questions than of, honor was attacked or the only way to address these things is war, not diplomacy, any number of those things. And that's not, you can't point to that and say, Victorian culture did this, right? It's a broader moment. It's a broader thing happening than just someone shot someone else. You were leaning forward. Okay.
Just posture.
Yeah.
Just trying to maintain posture.
So this is one way to get at these different forms of causes, especially in the context of history. There are immediate causes and there are real causes, is what Thucydides calls them, but immediate versus present conditions or something like that. But different types of causes. I'm
just thinking when we go back to Herodotus or Thucydides, when they tell the story, you have, there's this guy and he, the king killed his son and he was working for the king and then someone else came to him and said, hey, you can work with me to overthrow the king. And that started the war.
Yes.
That's like a very ancient way of talking about how a war started.
Right.
Whereas we as modern people, we have scholars that are like, all right, I've spent 7 years analyzing the history of bread prices in ancient Persia, but that doesn't necessarily mean that this is enough. We need to gather more data to be able to tell us why the Persian War started.
Right.
And the ancient guy said, well, it's because that guy was
right.
insulted by this guy and he killed his kid.
Yes.
Is
right?
it just that the ancient world just doesn't care about data as much as we as modern people do?
That might be true. I would say, again, Thucydides is separating between these two different types of causes. In his is in the history of the Peloponnesian, he'll talk about this same distinction and say that the immediate cause of one of the conflicts he's writing about is the breaking of a treaty. So in the same way of similar to World War I, but the real cause is this kind of bubbling conflict that then gets its moment to be expressed in the breaking of a treaty. So there's still that separation between the two of them. I think what you're saying is that when Herodotus is telling history, it's people doing things. It's not giant social forces.
But when in the ancient world, when they're telling history, they're also trying to like weave in a teaching or thinking about the ideal type to it.
Sure.
Don't be the kind of king that murders your subjects' kids, or else they'll come back and attack you.
Right.
Whereas when somebody is writing about the 7-year fluctuation of the history of bread prices and its causes and how that sort of caused the Peloponnesian War or whatever, they don't have a moral teaching element to it. They're trying to give you, quote unquote, an objective.
They might say that they are proposing certain policies for price controls or something like that, and which would lead to a more kind of technocratic view of these things, as opposed to Herodotus is very much a moral view of conflict comes from failure of its leaders or immoral opponents who are just instigating conflict. And so maybe that's part of the difference.
So are statisticians technocrats? Is that the...
Probably. Yeah, I mean, if you get to a point where it's, this one factor increases life, that...
Do you feel that siren call there, math student?
No, I'm not going into like public health or something like that. But like there's like a strain of it that would say we should do everything we can to force people to live longer or be healthier, or people can be informed about information and then make their choices from there. Like
this is just maybe even plugging future episodes. This is kind of the ethic behind a book that both Hannenberg and I have been reading over Christmas, which is the Foundation trilogy. It's very much a
that's the
dream about what happens if like statisticians get to rule the universe.
Right. Build an algorithm that predicts everything.
Yeah,
right?
and they can predict everything. And then wouldn't it just be better if like all the smarts ruled us?
Yes.
And it's very much like a post-war.
Yes.
He's
actually in favor of that. He's not. I guess part of me thought he's critical of that. Anyway,
we'll talk about it in the episode.
I have not actually read it.
Yeah.
Is that the episode you're prepping? Are we going to do a duo episode?
Oh, I'm waiting. I want you to finish Foundation first before we do.
Are we going to do the trilogy?
I'd like to. Yeah,
should I finish the trilogy before we do it?
Yeah.
I think that'd be worth. I'm not sure one.
You
book
gotta
is
learn
enough.
about the mule
But
before
then
we get into it.
Then I should read it. We should just each do one book.
Oh, let's do it.
Why don't we just each do one book?
Friendship.
It's a quick, easy read. You should do it.
Okay, so so Graham's last question I think is really important. Of Herodotus paints things really easily. Of this led to this, led to this, led to war, and I think what is really fascinating about the book. I'm only 3 books in out of I think 9, and the books build on each other. So both you have recurring characters. So Croesus comes back in book 3, which we'll talk about sometime in the future. But also these are bloodlines. And so you're seeing the sons of sons of sons. Primarily, there are women in it too, but it is primarily the story of men. I think that was during our AMA. This is mostly about men. But you also get to see this kind of cyclical pattern to history that there's something about the father that is mirrored in the son and then corrected in the grandson or something like that. So that's one way of telling history. But that he's oversimplifying. And based on footnotes, he's wrong about a lot of things. So that's frustrating, right? He's
not. There was a dream about a giant donkey.
Yeah, sure. Or the one we laughed about
peeing
a lot.
All
yeah,
over
that's what I'm going to say, that one, of the daughter peeing over.
Pee-pee kid. I remember Pee-pee kid.
Peeing over all of Europe, I think. Like that might have actually happened, but also someone actually had to conquer Europe and it wasn't the dream that did it. And then, but there is something correct to like when your populace feels pressured by prices, they rise up or whatever, right? Or if there's a plague that's going to impact your Plantagenet episode forever ago where you talked about the Black Death. Like the Black Death prevented war from happening in Europe because people died. So many people died. And that's a true thing also. So I think Thucydides says this, and I think it's correct here. Both of them are right, that Herodotus can oversimplify and say that certain kings did something and that caused something, and I think the historian can be right also. I think the question of what causes something would be best answered by if that thing didn't happen, would the outcome still occur, right? So if you remove the assassination of Franz Ferdinand, would World War I still happen? And that's
this sort of speculative history.
Yeah, you can call it that. In the fancy stats language is calling it potential outcomes. Mm-hmm. That when you do a study, what you want to know is, so like if the question, we'll talk about smoking in a little bit. And so to answer the question of does smoking cause cancer, what you want to do is give Graham a pack of cigarettes to smoke every day for 20 years and then go back in time and do it again where you don't smoke for 20 years. And then at the end of that, we look and say, does Graham have cancer in the smoking one and not in the other? Or does he have cancer in both or something like that? Do you notice a problem with that?
You can't go back in time.
You can't go back. We haven't invented time machines yet.
What if I had a twin?
That's one way people get around it, but twins still don't have the same...
That's right. My twin eats eggs for breakfast every day, and I don't.
So you either have differences between the twins or something unique to twins themselves. Like, is there something weird about the zygote that splits into 2 and then creates 2 children? And the answer is maybe. We've talked about it before. Twin studies are a way to get around a lot of these things. But even in my smoking example, you can't assign smoking to one person and not to another, right? It would be unethical to say, smoke for 20 years if you think it's going to cause cancer. And you can't just look at who smokes and who doesn't because there might be some predisposing factor that both leads you to smoke and also to have cancer.
So then is a historian somebody that either explicitly or implicitly ascribes to some sort of philosophy about causation?
I don't think you have to say that, because the historian would say they're being objective, and they probably have to focus on something, and so.
But if you're sitting down, you're going to write a book
Right.
on a period of history.
Right.
You're going to say, okay, what are the things that I'm going to focus on? What are the things that I think are important?
Right.
And what you're saying is, what do I think is at the top of the list for being more important in terms of causality, right?
Yeah, either the great people or
Yeah.
kind of these like broad social things. I agree with that, but I just listened to some of your Plantagenet episodes, which is why I keep bringing it up. But like, did your Plantagenet guy? Are you saying he over-focused on like the Plantagenet family?
Well, even when I did it, I read a bunch of different
Books to do
sources.
it.
So I read Brown, I think it's the guy's last name, and then I read Churchill's History of the English-Speaking People.
Yep.
And so I read a couple of different things. But I was very definitely like taking a narrative story,
Approach to it.
great person approach to it.
Very much so. Yes, I think different historians take different approaches to it, and they will run from it's entirely ideology to it's entirely data. And that's what I tried to get at many episodes ago of the difference between history of private life and Montelou. Montelou is 400 pages, about a 7-year period in this one town, Montelou, in rural France. And it ends up being this really fascinating story about these connections between all these family members, but there's not really much to apply outside of that one city. That's the problem with it, is you've not really learned anything about a town 10 miles over, because you've only learned about this one town, which might have similarities, but also might be totally idiosyncratic. Compare that to a history of private life. They're analyzing all of human history over the course of 5 volumes, but all of human history.
As
so
communists.
it wasn't. It was critical theory, I think is what it was.
Sorry.
But they have like a single, that book can then be used to understand any point in human history, because it's primarily a viewpoint as opposed to looking at data.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does.
I'm rambling.
Sorry, I'm knocking you off. I'm
No,
causing you
you're not.
to get off script.
Yeah, without Graham, this wouldn't have happened.
Yes.
I'm very efficient.
Rabbit Trail.
Efficient cost. Oh, my word.
Oh, hey, let's talk about that. Rabbit Trail, the show, is what we are, so I'm okay with that. So again, but this all gets at the same thing of, in history, what are we doing? Herodotus thinks he's tracking a series of causal events, and he thinks what causes each thing is the act of a king in most cases, or like the elite of the elite. There are times when common people come into the story. It's just not very common. It's not very regular for that to happen. Okay, so we've talked through some of these kind of distinctions there, and we're still kind of looking at like this old view. I'm trying to get an ancient view of what causes something else. That does bring us to Aristotle, which we've covered before. Do you all remember what these 4 causes are? What it is for? Yeah, how Aristotle codifies cause.
I mean, there's the final cause, the efficient cause, the formal cause, and the
Santa.
The Santa
Claus. Yeah.
Did you say material? I don't know if you said material.
No, I didn't say material. I
Okay.
said formal. Are formal and material different?
Formal and material are different.
Okay.
Okay. So what the easiest way to get at it is, I think, what do I have here? Yes. If you're designing a table, if you're watching on YouTube, you see us. The 3 of us are sitting at a table as we conduct this discussion. And if we were to look at each other and say, what caused this table? How would you answer what caused this table?
Somebody watered some trees.
Okay, so you're saying like the wood itself had to be like made at some point, and there's a material to this table. That's the material cause of why is there a table is wood. That like we need wood for there to be a table.
Bob the carpenter.
You need someone to make that table. So that's the efficient cause. That's the one who's doing something. The primary source of the change for this final product, that's the efficient cause. So there has to be a carpenter. What else does that carpenter need?
Idea of tableness.
So like some kind of design to say, like, I want a square table or a circle table, or what shape would you call this? Oblong? What is this?
Oval.
An ovular table? There must be some design to it.
Boat-shaped.
A boat?
Yeah, it's like a boat.
What boat is... Oh, I guess I'm thinking of boats top and down, but you're thinking of it side to side.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I use that analogy with my kids. I say we're all in a little boat, and we're all going in the same direction. And I know where we're going, but I need you all to row.
I like that. That's
Yeah.
good. So that would be a formal cause. So what is the form that you're trying to attain to? In this case, it'd be the table that looks like an oval. And then there's a final one of like, why does this table exist?
We needed a table for a classroom, so we hired a carpenter to take trees and make it.
Yeah, so the thing you're going to use it for eventually, that's the final cause of table. So us sitting around talking or learning from students, or if you eat food at your dining room table, dining would be your final cause. So then that splits us.
Holding up our YouTube camera.
It's holding up our YouTube camera, sitting on top of what I think
And your fuzzy waters.
I think it's supposed to be a selfie stick, is what that actually is.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It breaks into a tripod at the bottom also, but
Cool.
It's left over from your influencing days.
from my Instagram influencer days. Yeah. I have all of 3 pictures on Instagram, so clearly it was a short-lived time in my life. Okay, so
You haven't accepted me.
have you added me?
I think so.
No.
I think it was like 5 years ago I added you.
This is embarrassing. I follow you on Twitter. Does that count?
Do you really? Oh, gosh.
Okay.
I tweet about like I tweet about like classical education and the stock market, which is probably really frustrating for people because they're either following me for one or the other reason. I should probably just have 2 different twits.
I know you're. Yeah, I don't like that at all. I know you're quite an influencer. I'm not sure you're quite at the point of having 2 different Twitter accounts. Please,
Fair,
let's
thank
get
you.
that. Okay, thank you. Okay, so that gets us to now moving past it. Thank you very much.
Move past it.
Moving
Here we go.
past.
Just
Okay,
move
so
past it.
where are we right now? We've looked at how there's Virgil has this conception that cause is an important thing to understand, and then we look at how does an idea of cause develop. It moves through science, it moves through medicine, it moves through law, and then the ambiguity requires a type of structure, which then Aristotle provides with these 4 different causes. Okay, do these 4 causes help us in looking at history? So is there a way that we can take a material, formal, efficient, and final cause and understand what Herodotus is talking about in his histories?
The final cause is always going to be the more controversial one.
Why these people are doing what they're
I
doing?
mean, and this is sort of even comes up when we're at a school when we're choosing a history textbook. Sometimes you'll get these history textbooks that are a little too, like, God's sovereign hand of dominion over history and they're explaining like World War I happened because God wanted America to become the world power. You're like, I don't know about that. This is probably not the final cause where we really want to be,
Or we don't know.
or we don't. Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway.
I think, but final cause can, there can be multiple final causes that, so when we'll talk about Cambyses whenever I do my next Herodotus episode, the son of Cyrus. So like, Cyrus wanted to invade Egypt. Well, that's, he invading Egypt is his final cause. Do you know what I mean? Like, or I'm sorry, the final cause would be rather he wanted to grow his empire as big as possible. So we know that. And there are things that happen later because he invades Egypt, but I don't think those were his intention in doing it, right? It's kind of, he as a person takes an action and then makes his next decision of what he wants to do next. So yeah, I think we get final causes as to why people are doing things. I think we get a lot of efficient causes, at least in as much as we're talking about a narrative approach to history. The person doing the action matters a lot. That would be the efficient cause, the person doing something. And I don't think that like material and formal matter quite so much.
What about the human nature element? So if you think about like the logic, if you want to call it the logic of violence. So someone does something and kills a citizen of your nation, and you are going to come back and go big. You're going to go bigger than, if someone shoots the Archduke Ferdinand, you're not just going to go and do like for like. Like you need to assert. You don't want this to ever happen again, so to do it, you try to set up a deterrent by going bigger.
Right.
But if you go bigger, then all of a sudden you've sort of got this escalation of reciprocity. And so, what would that like human nature, the logic of, if you want, I've heard people describe it as the logic of violence. Where would that fit in regards to causes of war or causes of conflict? Is that a material cause?
When you were saying that?
Yeah.
Because the people doing war in that case are humans, and they are the material of war in a weird way. It just feels weird to say it that way. I'm trying to think of where else it would fit other than it being just the efficient. When you're talking about the people, like just depends on which person you're talking about. If you're talking about the foot soldier in combat, they're not the one choosing to go to war in most cases. So in that case, it's still who's the ruler. That ruler is the efficient cause in most cases, and then the people fighting are material for the war. Really, when you get down to it, which is a bummer. I don't think that answers your question quite, though. Is that get at
Yeah,
it?
I think I'm still forming it.
Okay. Maybe to say differently, I'm sure you can find ways to fit in a material and a formal cause. So your formal cause, like, how would you make it your formal cause? You think war is the way people should live, therefore you pursue war every spring or summer or whatever. In that sense, going to war at certain periods of time would be the form, right? You'd say the form of life should be war.
Could it also be the type of warfare? Like the formal cause could be, well, we all live near the sea, so it's going to be naval battles as opposed to anything else.
Yep.
And then there's some valleys, so we do certain things with cannons.
Yep.
Like that might be the formal cause of the warfare is the surroundings dictate what kind of warfare it's going to be.
And same on that. It could be that, like, if you have agreements with other nations about, like, how do we treat each other in war? So, we fight this war until the last person is dead. I think that would be a formal cause. Like there are certain agreements you've made, implicitly or explicitly about what war should look like. That would be the form of war. So maybe you can get all four of these in there. Maybe more specifically, I'm saying Herodotus seems to focus more on the efficient cause. He's focused a lot more on who are these people making these choices that do these things, and somewhat on the final cause. He tries to get into motivation sometimes, but seems mostly focused on, like, are they good people or not? Does that? I don't have anything formulated on this. I wonder if there's something about a difference between those two different approaches to history. Because I don't think I would say that history of private life is focused on formal and material causes, but maybe they are. Probably more focused on a formal cause, that the form essentially is the embedded social structure that everyone lives in, and like that becomes kind of front and center, much more so than people.
Don't they have the formal cause that, like, all human interactions are based on class conflict? And so
Yeah,
that's
class
the thing
conflict,
that gets
yeah.
superimposed over everything.
Yeah.
And so that's the formal cause.
Yeah, like that's literally the design, the form of all
Yeah.
life. So maybe there's something there. I hadn't planned on anything there, but again, I would say Herodotus is much more focused on the efficient causes, the actors themselves, and then final causes, which would be like what are the things they're trying to accomplish. Okay, I wanted to get to. I have a bunch of other stuff in here. Francis Bacon and Spinoza and David Hume have thoughts on different kinds of what can we know about causation, what can't we know about causation. Bacon has a great thing about how there are certain places where we should look for certain kinds of causes. So in the sciences, you can find formal and material causes, but you can't find final causes. You can't find meaning from chemical equations. Like, that doesn't make sense to look for that there. But you could look to history or English or philosophy for kind of those deeper philosophical questions. I just throw that out as one thought.
But we don't talk about science that way anymore. Even just today, I was listening to we were driving, and they had the radio show From the Top, which is an NPR show where they interview kids who are really good musicians, and they do these little interviews. And they were talking about one kid really likes astronomy and space, and the interviewer was talking about like that when you study the universe, it really puts things into perspective about your own life and your own meaning. He just sort of said this off the top of his head, and the 16-year-old was like, "Yeah, I guess so," and that just struck me. It was like, we talk about science as having an implicit final cause to it.
Yes.
We talk about, but that doesn't necessarily make any sense. Just because the universe is big doesn't give us any sort of moral sense. But this person was assuming that it does. Sure. And you hear this a lot from, like, especially sort of the pop science of astronomy. Carl Sagan did this, and so does that other guy. Is it Neil
deGrasse Tyson?
Neil deGrasse Tyson. They talk about, like, human person. When you think of the universe, we need to take care of our little blue planet.
Sure.
Like, okay.
I have not read this book. I've just heard this secondhand. I think it's in his 2017 Astrophysics for People in a Hurry. He has a introduction where he talks about how philosophy is useless and it's a waste of time, and no one should bother with that. They should only focus on science. And then spends 300 pages on philosophy of what
the philosophy of
the meaning of science,
meaning
right?
of science,
which is a work of philosophy. That's not science, right? In this kind of, again, in the sense of what Bacon is talking about, of you just can't go beyond material and formal causes, because that's all that, again, chemical equations or things that are happening in the sky, or pick your thing. That's all they can tell you.
I guess my point is that there's a smuggled in philosophy into talking about science that I think a lot of people don't realize.
Yes.
And that's exactly what he's saying. I'm a man of science, then here's 300 pages of my philosophy talking about what science means.
Yes, exactly. So maybe that's where Aristotle is helpful too, of splitting out what we can know and can't know based on a discussion. And probably also, in the same way that when Herodotus gets something wrong about...
he never gets anything.
He got lots of things wrong, and you all didn't think he did, but I did. When we talked about book 2...
The water horse.
Water horses, right. Where he talks about his stuff in Egypt, and he talks about the Herodotus machine, about how they built the pyramids. It's pretty bad that he... I thought that was bad. I think you all didn't think it was as bad.
Wasn't it sticks and something else?
He just said it was sticks. That's all he says. He doesn't say how it's built or anything. So it sounds like... He just sounds like that guy you knew in middle school who was like, yeah, I met the president. He's clearly lying to you.
Oh, I know how they built the pyramids with sticks.
Yeah, it's
all right, thanks,
okay,
man.
Yeah. But you also wouldn't totally know because he went to Egypt, so he might have actually learned. So it's
I had a friend that used to eat paper on the bus, whole sheets of paper. And I was like, why are you doing that? And he's like, it's made of trees. It helps me breathe better. And I was like,
it doesn't make any sense.
I'm not old enough to refute you. Doesn't sound right, exactly. But you better give me one of those sheets of paper. And I ate one too.
You want to hedge your bet? Did you actually eat one?
I think so, yeah. He was very convincing. He was so confident.
Have y'all seen that meme? I don't know if meme is the right word, but it's a picture of a kid, and the story is he told all of his classmates that his uncle was Superman. Have y'all seen this? And then it turns out that his uncle is whoever played Superman in the movies, and so he brings his uncle along to prove to everyone. Yeah. So it's kind of that thing of maybe Herodotus is right and he knows what he's talking about.
Could have been sticks.
Are we talking Dean Cain Superman, or are we talking
he's the newest one.
Cavill?
Yeah, Henry Cavill. Okay. Yeah. Anyway, so I think that's a helpful thing to limit what kind of knowledge. The point I'm trying to make about Herodotus is that he can be wrong about material things or formal things of the form of pyramid making machine, but he still has a lot of really good things to say about efficient and final causes. Mm-hmm. And I think that still makes him worthwhile. That was the thought I had in going through all of this. Is I think you can look at an ancient work that is wrong or uninformed. Uninformed is the wrong word, but not modern in its awareness of science, and still get lots of useful things because you've moved on in your knowledge of material and formal causes doesn't mean you've moved on in your knowledge of efficient and final causes. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. So I think those are different domains of knowledge, and Herodotus is still useful in the ones that he's writing about.
Phew.
Yeah, thank you. I'm not wasting your life. Okay. So the final thing to go into is, we talked about it a little before, that when I hear the word causation or correlation, the first thing I think of is that phrase that causation does not imply correlation. We've already kind of clarified what that means, in that it's kind of it's meant as a formal statement that you can't only prove causation from correlation, which is a fine statement to make. You can, if you Google spurious correlations, there's a website that will auto-generate different correlations, and one of them is it's Nick Cage movies versus drownings in pools or something like that.
One of my favorites is Age of Miss America pageant winners and murders by steam, hot objects, and vapors.
Okay, yep, nailed it. And it actually looks really compelling.
It's per capita consumption of cheese, and
was it dying by falling out of a fishing boat?
Or dying by being strangled in your bed sheets.
Oh yeah, that's right.
The more cheese you eat, the more people are dying in their beds.
Yeah,
so
stop
it.
Yeah,
that's just
spread
science.
Awareness.
I can't
Anti-cheese.
that.
Spread awareness. Hashtag.
Spread awareness, not goat
cheese.
What'd you say? Yeah, per capita cheese consumption and number of people who died by becoming entangled. It's literally, if you just Google it, you'll find it. It's 1-to-1. It literally.
It's a silent killer, guys.
Is that what it is? And obviously these are goofy correlations, and that's the whole point of it, is to say just because two things are correlated, it doesn't mean that they're related to each other.
But repetitive and consistent correlation shows a high probability of causation, right?
And that's there's a somewhat famous story around the discovery that smoking leads to cancer. I made reference to it earlier because we're talking about it now. So this has not been a foregone conclusion for ever, or even for a very long time. It's only in the last 70 years at this point that's really been accepted widely. And there started to be kind of an upswell of studies pointing to concerns around this connection between cancer and smoking. It kind of builds in the 40s. The 50s, we get some of the major studies about it, but there's big pushback from a guy named Fisher, and Fisher is one of the main statisticians. I think he's the guy who came up with the analysis of variance test. Is he a NOVA? I think he's a NOVA. Yeah. What it is doesn't matter, but one of the main statistical tests to determine differences between different groups. It's called a difference of means test. None of this matters, but he is the guy who comes up with the math to determine whether results are significant or not. Maybe that's the way to say it. And he is someone who is not convinced by studies related to smoking and the relationship with cancer.
But they got the little black label on them.
They do now, but that had to come from somewhere, right? Okay, so if you all wanted to prove this, well, I assume you are on board for this relationship, but if you wanted to prove this connection between smoking and cancer, how would you set about to do that?
Try to find as many people who had lung cancer and see how many of them have been smokers.
Okay. And compare that to how many people with lung cancer who don't smoke.
Correct.
And then you'd be able to say, your percentage of people is higher in this one than the other one.
Yeah, I would say sample size of people from random locations in different places, different cultures, that sort of thing, that both smoked and didn't smoke, and then compare the rates of lung cancer in both groups.
Okay. So
I would also do that thing that you do in 7th grade. We have 2 jars. You fill them with cotton balls, and you have one of the jars smoke a bunch of cigarettes. So then the cotton ball jar is all black and gross. The other one is all pure and white, and then you can scare your classmates into not smoking.
I like your style. Is that a thing that you did in 7th grade?
Yeah, didn't you guys do this science experiment?
With a cigarette?
Yeah, a cigarette. You actually, and then you pump the smoke into the jar, and then eventually the cotton balls become all brown and nasty and black and gross. And you can say, this is what's happening to your lungs.
That's disgusting. No, I've never seen that. That seems terrifying for a 7th grader.
I watched the ad a lot where the guy cracked an egg into a pan and was like, this is your brain on drugs.
Yeah, we had a guy that come to our school and he had his larynx removed. He had to talk with the little recorder next to his... afterwards, we saw him outside and he was smoking through the little
Is that
hole.
true?
Yeah.
That's the sad part.
Yeah.
So just you two, since you two kind of gave different answers, I'll just to go through both of them because AJ's is a development on Graham's. So Graham's AJ is better than Graham is what I want. Sorry if I wasn't clear enough with that answer. So what Graham proposed is you get a bunch of people who already smoke. Is that what you said?
It doesn't matter now. Ask AJ.
Let me make your wrong answer even wronger. So you just do an observation. You say who smokes and who doesn't smoke, and then you say who has cancer and who doesn't have cancer. Your problem with that is that you might have different correlations under that. So let's say that people who smoke tend to be older, and people who smoke tend to be male. Let's just say.
Yeah, and maybe half of them eat tar just
for fun. Reason. Yeah, exactly. So, but even take
work on a lot of cars, inhale a lot of fumes that way.
Well, even let's say that. Let's say it's a bunch of automotive mechanics who smoke and a bunch of not automotive mechanics who don't. Well, there's a bias at that point where you're not comparing apples to apples. You're comparing apples to orangutans. I don't know. That again, to go back before, what we want to have to prove whether something causes something is if you removed it, would the thing not have happened eventually? So in our World War I example, if you remove the assassination of the Archduke, is there no World War I? In this case, if we remove Graham from your next 20 years, if we remove smoking, Graham doesn't smoke, just to say that. But
smoke a pipe.
If fair, but you don't smoke it every day. You don't smoke a pack a day, which was my example from before that I know of.
I don't think I smoked a pipe in a year. COVID, a little nervous about it. Yeah, the respiratory things.
That's fair. I don't know. Maybe it would kill all the COVID. I don't know.
That's great. Yeah.
I don't know.
Like Stubb in Moby Dick.
Yep. He smokes so as not receive the bad air.
It preserves him.
That's what I can't remember the guy. It's whoever the previous CEO of Southwest was. He came and gave a talk at UT, and he talked about how he had to smoke. He said this. This might have been just the addiction talking, but he said that he had to smoke to keep his his like veins open. I forget the details. I'm not a scientist.
Oh, the nicotine opens it up and
yeah,
keeps
yeah,
it flowing?
yeah. Or like it kept I forget if it kept the blood flowing or if it was the oxygen it kept flowing. But it was something like he needed that like hot smoke in him to do that, which still sounds made up to me now that I say it out loud. But here we
Go
are.
to a sauna. Anyway,
You could do
Or
that.
drink some coffee.
That's also
Or
an option.
alcohol widens the blood vessels. I think there's more things than just
I
smoking.
feel like him hitting up the bottle during the day might have gone poorly. Maybe smoking was more socially acceptable.
I mean, I don't see any reason why you can't do all three. Smoke
hard
and
is
drink in
it
a
to-
sauna. I mean, that sounds like
That's
that
fair.
sounds like
That's
an
fair.
afternoon.
No,
How hard is it to run an airline?
That's exactly right. So anyway, back to how wrong Graham is. So so if you get these two different groups, you'll have differences between the groups, and a critic like R.A. Fisher, who is our statistician of note right now, can look at that and say those underlying differences could actually be the causes of differences in lung cancer, differences in heart attacks, differences in whatever your thing is. Okay, so what would you do in response to that? Well, you'd find people who are similar to each other and then compare them to each other. That's what AJ is talking about.
Good job.
So AJ, thank you.
While
for
trying to control for other variables by
Yeah.
getting a large sample size
Yeah.
with lots of people from different areas.
You're still wrong though. So no, I'm just sorry. Not exactly
I
wrong.
disagree.
I see your facts and I disagree. No.
I
So
don't believe them.
But so let's say that I do a study and I take 20,000 people and I have them fill out a questionnaire and it asks them for their gender and it asks them for their age and it asks them for their occupation and how long they've been smoking and all these different things. And then I compare two different groups that are equal sizes and on average are the same for age, weight, pick all your categories. What's wrong at that point? What could a critic do with that study that's balanced on all these things that you checked for when you did your survey when they got separated?
Nothing. It's ironclad.
Perfect. How could it be otherwise?
That's just science.
That's pure science. A critic could look at that and say, you haven't measured for everything. So sure, you've measured for things that we think are important, but what if there is an underlying genetic marker that both predisposes you for smoking and predisposes you for cancer? To which do you all want to respond?
Or how many people live next to nuclear plants, and everyone knows nuclear plants make you want to smoke.
Or give you cancer. Thank you. I'm glad you went for the smoking. So either you can take it the way. Either way, you're saying you haven't matched everything correctly, or you haven't matched everything because you haven't measured everything because you can't measure everything.
There's still unaccountable variables.
How do we ever do nutritional studies saying things like cholesterol or eggs or wine? How come we have...
Well, that's why you get those little graphs where it's like number of studies that say tomatoes will give you cancer, 4. Number of studies that say tomatoes will cure cancer, 4.
Oh, crap.
Like that's why you get those.
Yeah. I'll just read. This is from R.A. Fisher. What if the development of acute lung cancer was preceded by an undiagnosed chronic inflammation, he wrote, and what if this inflammation led to a mild discomfort but no conscious pain? If that were the case, wrote Fisher, then one would expect those suffering from pre-diagnosed lung cancer to turn to cigarettes for relief. It's not the cigarettes causing the lung cancer, it's the lung cancer causing the cigarettes.
We owe Big Tobacco a massive apology.
Yeah, we're doing it wrong. Those guys have been trying to help us out this whole time.
Exactly. They're just trying to give you a chance.
Joe Camel could have been a surgeon. Who knows?
This is the money quote at the end. To take the poor chap's cigarettes away from him would be rather like taking away the stick from a blind man.
Oh, unlucky strike.
Yeah,
And he's going to have that subconscious discomfort from his cancer, and he'll have nothing to puff on.
Yes. Now,
Puffless.
do you have any? So he offers this as an explanation. So then, what's the response to that? Like, what do
I
you
don't know,
do?
it's ironclad.
Well, you just disagree with him. You think he's right, and then therefore cigarettes should be a-okay.
Just start getting a bunch of monkeys
Give 'em to the
smoking.
children. No,
Just
what'd
start
you
smoking some monkeys.
Sorry, what?
Take lung
it that
tissue from a bunch of different people and then just start running smoke through it.
Oh, that'd be an
And lung
option,
tissue it does not have. Well, you could huge development.
Okay.
Take one guy, clone him a bunch,
There you go.
Yeah, there it is. Thank
make
you.
some smoke,
Yes.
and have some not smoke.
Or just have him smoke on one side of his body.
One
keep
lung?
the other, say one lung, keep the other lung.
Just
Yeah.
pump. Oh yeah, there you go. Just
you
pump
go.
it one through. No, because the left and right lungs might be different. Like left and right brain might be different.
We'll
Yeah,
never know.
I think we need the cloning.
We'll never know.
The Star Wars could have done it easy. Clone
I was
Wars.
going to say,
those guys
usually
could have.
we'll never know. We
tested it
could
for
know,
sure.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
We can build, what's the name of the planet where they build all the clones? I don't know the name of it.
Clinopia.
Yeah, yep, that's the one. Yep. So I think this is the way science should go.
Someone's screaming at their car radio right now. Or no, we're not on
We
the
could
radio.
do this.
Tattoo opening. You rube.
Can someone? No, wait. I was gonna say leave us a 1-star review saying that, but I don't want you to leave a 1-star review. Leave a 5-star review.
Opening, you rube.
Yeah, leave a 5-star review telling us the answer to that question of where the clones were made. What was R.A. Fisher's response to? So essentially, the way it works is a study comes out. It's pretty compelling stuff, and Fisher will come back with one of these criticisms. A new study will come out. Fisher will reply, and it's like really standing in the way of there being any development on like limits on tobacco usage, because this is the I'm sure everyone has seen these really silly videos where it's like 9 out of 10 doctors agree that smoking is good for your health or improves circulation or whatever thing it is. Like, and in the meantime, people are dying because of that, because tobacco is not limited. So what is Fisher's response after a couple of these different studies come out and he rejects them? What's like the ultimate conclusion of all this?
I don't know.
The abandonment of all
fired?
human knowledge.
Yes. No, he dies is the answer to it. This is this ends up being one of the like biggest stains on his reputation is his resistance to acceptance of these different studies. What's the point that I'm making of this?
But he's just trying to hold the line for science.
This is actually a good point in that he's not wanting to move too quickly to say, the concern is that you would ban something that, again, you're taking the stick away from the blind guy. You're hurting people who have lung cancer is what he's arguing, which I understand. But what's hard is that to have gotten 6 or 7 high-quality studies that point to there being something wrong here and rejecting all of them essentially boils down to this correlation does not imply causation thing, that time after time the researchers are looking at studying smoking as relates to lung cancer, and Fisher doesn't accept any of these as having any information. And again, that is ultimately to his detriment. I think it's fine to ask whether his process was correct, but his outcomes were just wrong. Like, did other people
Well, that's troubling.
Did other people jump on? Well, just because you raised it, I had
No, but I'm saying that like, if your processes are correct, but your outcomes can be wrong, then how are your processes correct?
Oh, but I think every stock trader has trades that go against them. It's more like you've referenced the Kyle Bass quote of you buy nickels in the hopes of them going to dollars, but if you lose 10 cents, it's not a big deal. Like that's at some level, this is not the place I thought we'd end it, but like all decisions are probabilistic, and so you should take the one anyway.
Gotcha. So he was saying like this doesn't give us 100% certainty, and everyone was like, yeah, but it's pretty compelling stuff.
And then he took that to say because it's not 100%, it's 0%.
Yeah,
when actually it should have been it's not 100%, it's maybe 95%.
Yeah.
Because like it's fine to like question whether this thing is true or not. Like that's the purpose of science is to ask, is what we know true? I think that's a fine question to ask. But to hold on to that in spite of all evidence to the contrary is problematic. And then also the kicker, Fisher was a smoker. And so really what this comes down to, a way that it's often interpreted is that it was just like it was a bias of his. He couldn't think that he was wrong and doing damage to his own body. Therefore, he had to push back on all these studies. So the man who is known for his mathematical genius, his statistical genius, at the end of the day is still a human who just wants to smoke, right?
Just wants to have a dart at the end of a busy day.
At the end of a busy day. Yes. So let's see. I think that's all that. So he's still a super big deal guy. He's the reason that we can do statistics today.
So is that just how his story is written when you're studying statistics? It's like, well, he was pretty great, but he was kind of a doofus on the whole smoking thing. So he's kind of an embarrassment. Let's move on.
Not embarrassment. No, he's not a big deal enough person to like get in that kind of public conversation about his legacy or whatever. He, in the same way that like scientists will put their name on, like when they discover an animal, like it becomes the Magby animal, like you put your name into it. They're just like the Fisher test, like is a thing. Like putting Fisher's name on things is still a thing, and that has not been taken away. And again, I don't think he's not a big enough deal to like have his name removed from stuff. He does also have some. There's other stuff that's like he was born in 1890. Like there's other stuff that's questionable in his writings and intellectual thought, but I don't think anyone really cares about that. I'm rambling at this point. Mostly did a lot of good stuff. His stuff on smoking was not good, but
wait, so smoking causes cancer?
Smoking causes cancer. There's
Good
your
to know.
So stop smoking your pipe. I don't know. Do whatever you want to with your life. Do whatever you want to with that information.
Okay.
So anyway, the thing we were going into was about causation. There are different types of causation that we are able, some of them we can study through history, some of them we can study through science, and that distinction and separation, I think, is really helpful. The statement that correlation does not imply causation has a certain formal meaning, but it does not mean there is no information to be gained from correlation. That was the thing I wanted to make sure to wrap up with. And that is it.
Cool. Okay. Well, this has been Classical Stuff You Should Know. You can find our website at classicalstuff.net. You can subscribe to us on Patreon if you want.
And you should.
And you should.
Do it.
If you do that, you get all kinds of cool goodies like our monthly AMA and some other cool things we send out to our listeners. Bonus episodes, and at certain tiers you can hear all of our banter between episodes, which is extra fun. And then you can tweet at us at classical CLSSCAL stuff. And I think that's it. Is that all the websites and stuff? Oh, you can email us at theguys@classicalstuff.net. That's the last one.
Important stuff.
Well, we're happy to be back and making episodes for you guys, and we will see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.